Pasadena, California, October 21st, 1965, 3:45 in the morning. The phone rings. A man in his bed reaches for it. He is 47 years old, dark hair, a slight grin, even half asleep. His name is Richard Feynman. On the line is a reporter from ABC News. The reporter says, "Sir, you have just won the Nobel Prize." Feynman says, "I am not coming. Tell them I am not coming." 5 words. He rolls over. He goes back to sleep. Now here is what almost nobody tells you about this story, because the title says he refused the Nobel Prize, and that is the bait. The truth is sharper. He did not formally refuse it. He tried. He was talked out of it. A colleague at Caltech told him, "Richard, if you refuse this, the circus will be bigger than if you accept." So he accepted. He went to Stockholm. He took the $55,000, split 3 ways with 2 other men. Those 2 men were Shinichiro Tominaga of Japan and Julian Schwinger of Harvard. All 3 had independently solved the same enormous problem in quantum physics. All 3 deserved the prize. Feynman respected them both. That was not the issue. The issue was never the men. The issue was the medal itself. But the word he used for the rest of his life whenever anyone asked him about that medal, 1 word, every time: useless. And the reason he kept using that word is the reason I want you to keep watching. Because the man who almost refused the biggest prize in science was not being difficult. He was not being ungrateful. He had figured out something about honors and titles and the entire machinery of prestige that most people never figure out in their whole lives. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. 16 years after that phone call, Feynman sat down for an interview with the BBC. The producer asked him about the Nobel, and he said, on camera, the words that became the quiet center of the rest of his life.
Was it worth the Nobel Prize?
I don't.
He said, "I do not see that it makes any point that someone in the Swedish Academy decides that this work is noble enough to receive a prize. I have already got the prize. The prize is the pleasure of finding the thing out, the kick in the discovery, the observation that other people use it. Those are the real things. The honors are unreal to me. The honors are unreal to me." Think about that for a second. The most prestigious award in science, given to him for work he did back in 1948. And 17 years later, on television, a man is calling the whole thing unreal. That is not modesty. Modesty would say, "I do not deserve it." Feynman was not saying that. He was saying something harder. He was saying the category itself was theater. The whole idea of deciding one person's work deserves a medal and another person's does not. But where does that conviction come from? Because you do not wake up one morning at 47 and decide the Nobel Prize is unreal. A view like that has roots, and to find the roots, you have to go back, not to 1965, to the New York garment district decades earlier, to a small uniform shop owned by a man named Melville. Melville Feynman was Richard's father. He was not a scientist. He was not educated past high school. He sold uniforms. Uniforms to bellhops, uniforms to police, uniforms to firemen. And he had one observation about his business, an observation he handed to his son more than once. He said, "Look at the Pope. Take away the hat. Take away the robes. Take away the ring. You are left with a regular man, same as anybody else on the street. The hat is what makes him the Pope, not the man underneath." Melville sold the hats. So Melville knew, and he taught his boy, never confuse the costume with the person. Never confuse the epaulets on the shoulder with the man who is wearing them. That is the seed. And every single time in his life Richard Feynman refused an honor, he was hearing his father's voice. But it was not just a nice lesson from childhood. Feynman lived by it, decade after decade. And the pattern starts earlier than most people realize. Here is the first test. 1934. He is 16 years old. Far Rockaway High School in Queens, New York. The school has an honor society. It is called Arista, The top students get invited. Feynman is one of them. Everyone already knows he is the sharpest kid in the building, so he joins. And within a few meetings, he figures out what Arista actually does. The main activity of the Honor Society is sitting in a room and voting on which other students are good enough to join the Honor Society. That is it. That is the whole thing. So he quits. He is 16. He walks away from the highest honor a student at that school can receive, because he has already done the math. A group whose entire purpose is telling other people they are not good enough is not a group he wants to be in. Now hold that image, the 16-year-old walking out of the Honor Society meeting, and jump forward 30 years. Feynman is in his 40s, full professor at Caltech, and he gets elected to the National Academy of Sciences. This is not a small honor. The Academy is the highest scientific society in the country. You do not apply. You are elected by the existing members. It is supposed to be the lifetime achievement badge for American scientists. Feynman sits through a few meetings, and he figures out what the National Academy actually does. The main activity of the Academy, as he saw it, was sitting in a room and voting on which other scientists were good enough to join the National Academy. Does that sound familiar? He resigns. He writes a letter. He tells the Academy, in plain language, that most of what they actually do is decide who else to let in. He is not interested in that kind of work. He signs the letter. He mails it. He never comes back. Same pattern, same man. 30 years apart. The 16-year-old boy in Queens and the 40-year-old professor at Caltech are the same person, watching the same ritual, making the same decision. And here is the filter Feynman used. The same filter every time. He would ask one question about any honor, any club, any title being offered to him. What does this group actually do when it meets? Not what does it claim to do. Not what is written on its letterhead. What does it actually do? Arista met to vote on who else to let into Arista. The National Academy met to vote on who else to let into the National Academy. The answer was always the same. The group existed to maintain the group. The work had left the room long ago. That filter is what he carried from 16 to 69. One question. What does this group actually do when the doors close? So by the time the phone rings at 3:45 in the morning in 1965, Feynman has already rejected honors for 30 years. He has turned down honorary doctorates from Columbia, from Chicago, from institutions all over the country. He has walked away from academies. He has dropped out of clubs. He has a clean record. And now, the Swedish Academy is on the other end of the line. Here is what actually happened after that 3:45 call. He tries to go back to sleep. He cannot. The phone rings again. Again. His wife Gwyneth tells him the news has already broken on the radio. There is no private refusal left. The world already knows. He calls Lee DuBridge, the Caltech president. He tells DuBridge he wants to refuse. And DuBridge asks him a question that changes the whole thing. He says, "Richard, if you refuse the Nobel Prize, what do you think happens next? You become the man who refused the Nobel. Every reporter in the country calls. Every paper runs a headline. You will not be able to work for a year." Acceptance, DuBridge says, is actually the quieter path. Feynman thinks about that, and he accepts. So December arrives. He flies to Stockholm. Tuxedo, medal, cameras. Now pay attention to a detail most people miss, the guest list. A Nobel laureate is allowed to bring people to the week of events. Most laureates stuff the list with dignitaries, heads of department, university presidents, senators, donors, sponsors. It is a performance. Feynman's list was short, just family and a few friends from Caltech, his wife, his sister Joan, a couple of colleagues. That was it. No university presidents, no senators, no performance. This is the man telling you with his guest list exactly what he later told you with his mouth. This is not a celebration for the world. This is a dinner with the people I actually care about. And then there's the banquet itself. At the Nobel banquet, Feynman is seated next to a princess of Denmark. She asks him what he works on. He tells her. He explains quantum electrodynamics as simply as he can, as simply as a man who is about to win the prize for it can. She looks at him. She says, "Oh, but nobody understands that, so we cannot talk about it." And Feynman, in the middle of the most prestigious dinner of his professional life, surrounded by royalty and ministers and laureates, replies with a sentence that tells you everything about him. He says, "On the contrary, it is because somebody knows something about it that we cannot talk about it. It is the things nobody knows anything about that we can discuss." Read that again. It is because somebody knows something about it that we cannot talk about it. He was saying, small talk about the weather, about family, about trivialities, fine. But performing expertise we do not have. Pretending to be sophisticated about a subject nobody at the table actually understands? That was the game he refused to play. At the Nobel banquet, to a princess. And that line, right there, is what Feynman thought the Nobel ceremony was. An entire industry of people performing expertise they did not have, handing out medals to each other for the performance. This is where most videos about Feynman stop the story, with the grumpy genius at the fancy dinner refusing to play the game. Feynman wins. But if you stop there, you miss the most important part, because the honest version of this story has one more turn. And this is the turn that separates intelligent viewers from casual ones. The Nobel Prize, the one he called useless, gave him something he would never have had without it: a megaphone. Before 1965, Richard Feynman was a physicist's physicist, famous inside the field, unknown outside it. After 1965, he was a household name, and he used that name. When he went on the BBC 16 years later and said, "The honors are unreal to me," the world listened, because a Nobel laureate was saying it. 21 years later, he sat on the Rogers Commission, Challenger disaster, and something happened that proved the megaphone theory in real time. The commission had 13 members: generals, senators, administrators. The commission's leadership wanted the investigation kept quiet, controlled, institutional. Feynman did the opposite. He took a small C-clamp. He squeezed the O-ring inside a glass of ice water. He showed the cameras the seal had lost its flexibility in the cold. 73 seconds after launch, 7 people dead. And the reason was this small, cheap ring that nobody in the room wanted to talk about. The country watched because the man doing it had the Nobel medal around his neck. Without the medal, he is a retired professor with a theory. With the medal, he is a man the cameras cannot look away from. So here is the honest truth of it. Feynman thought the prize was useless as a judgment on his work. The work had been done with or without the medal. The chalkboard had proved it 17 years before any Swedish envelope arrived. That chalkboard was where he had fought infinities for 2 years in the late 40s, where he had drawn diagrams no one had drawn before, where he had built a method that is now the standard visual language of particle physics. Every graduate student learns it. Every physicist uses it. But here is the turn. The prize was useful as a platform. It handed him a voice that reached past his department, past his campus, past his field, into the rest of the world. He did not want the honor. He used the megaphone. This is the nuance that most storytellers miss. He was not against the Nobel. He was against the idea that the Nobel was the point. The work was the point. The medal was a tool. Now, why does any of this matter to you? You did not click on this video to hear a physics lecture. You clicked because the title touched something you already felt. You have spent years watching the wrong people get the titles at your company. You have watched credentialed people get promoted over people who actually solve the problem. You have sat in meetings where the loudest resume won the argument against the better idea. You have stared at a profile full of certifications and badges and leadership awards and wondered, does any of this reflect the person actually doing the work? This system did not happen by accident. Someone built it. Someone decided that medals would matter more than work. Someone decided that a committee in Stockholm could stamp a man's career as real or unreal. And that same machinery runs your company, your industry, your life. The people with the epaulets built the rules. Of course the rules reward epaulets. Feynman spent his whole life answering that question, and his answer, in one sentence, was this: the epaulets do not make the man. The promotion does not make the engineer. The medal does not make the scientist. The title on the door does not make the leader. The costume is separate from the work. And once you can see that separation, you have inherited the one thing Feynman's father gave him. The one thing that made him drop Arista at 16, resign from the National Academy at 40, and nearly refuse the Nobel at 47. It is a kind of clarity. Once you have it, the whole theater of prestige looks different. You see the coworker with every certification who cannot debug a basic problem. You see the executive with a famous degree whose decisions bankrupt the division. You see the speaker on the conference stage whose entire expertise is having been on a conference stage before. And you see right next to them the quiet person who actually understands the work, the one who does not advertise, the one who probably does not have the awards, the one whose emails get ignored while the loud one gets promoted. You have been seeing this for 20 years. Maybe 30. Feynman saw it too. The difference is, he said it out loud. There was one line Feynman came back to more than any other. In interviews, in lectures, in private letters. For the last 20 years of his life, whenever anyone asked him about awards, he said some version of the same sentence. I have already got the prize. The prize is the pleasure of finding the thing out. Not the medal, not the banquet, not the speech. The thing itself. The moment you see something no one has seen before. The moment the equation works. The moment the stubborn problem finally opens up and shows you what it is. That is the prize. That was always the prize. The Swedish Academy just sent him a piece of metal, 17 years late, for something he had already been paid in full for. In 1948. Alone, at a chalkboard. The night he saw the thing. Everything after that was epaulets. But Feynman's refusal to play the prestige game was not his only war. There was another rule of science.